One of the best kept secrets in Silicon Valley is the Stanford StartX Accelerator. The numbers are insane. While 90% of startups fail, 92% of startups that go through the Stanford StartX Accelerator are either running or acquired 10 years later. And what's crazier is StartX companies are 2.6 times more likely to achieve $100 million valuation than other top accelerators. My startup, Prodigy, was one of those success stories. We went through StartX in 2015 and sold the company for 9 figures in 2021. And the lessons I learned inside the accelerator can be applied to any business. So in this video, I'm gonna break down everything I learned, from the formula to building billion-dollar companies, how to raise venture capital, what to focus on as an early-stage founder, and a bunch of other stuff that's gonna help if you are in business or want to be a founder. Probably the most important thing I learned inside the accelerator was a 3-part formula for building a business, and it works whether you're building a $1 million business or a $1 billion business. And you need all 3. The first 2 are critical, but they don't actually work unless you have the 3rd piece. So let me break down the formula. The first thing you need is a new or growing problem. This is the famous why now question from VCs. See, if you're solving some old, boring, existing problem, chances are the business's needs are probably already fulfilled. It's not something that you can really build a massive business around. And ultimately, all great businesses are built around finding a new or growing pain that they can provide a solution to. On top of that, you need a really big market. The simple formula is number of customers times the price point that you can charge those customers greater than $2 billion. $1 billion if you're not really looking to raise venture capital or you just want to build a pretty sizable business, but $2 billion is really ideal. That's going to allow you to raise venture capital. And sure, you're not going to get to $2 billion most of the time, but it allows you to just take a small piece of the pie and still build a really big business. But it's the 3rd piece that probably matters the most. And rather than telling you, I'm going to quote ultra controversial billionaire Peter Thiel, competition is for losers. Now, what Peter Thiel is really saying is not that you have to go out and kill all of your competitors. You need to build a moat around the solution to this large market with a growing problem. And this is critical. If you go out and you find an amazing problem, you build an amazing solution, you get all these happy customers, you can raise all this money, lots of press, people will see that. And if you don't have a moat that keeps them out of your business, they'll just come in, take all your goods, kill your business. And this happens to so many founders that are onto something and they just don't hold on to the market. So how do you build a moat around your business? Or to put it in Thiel vocabulary, how do you eliminate competition? Well, there's 3 ways. First is what's called a data moat. A data moat means that as you get more data, your product becomes better. This is something like maybe OpenAI today. As they gather more and more data, more people are using OpenAI, the product is getting better. And hopefully, if it plays out well, OpenAI, or your business in this example, stay ahead of the curve. The second way to build a moat is through network effects. Now, this is a bit of a 2-edged sword because early on, building a company that relies on network effects is really hard. When there's less users, the product is inherently less valuable. Therefore, the product kind of sucks early on. So you have to do a lot of growth hacks to get there. But if you're building a business that gets better as more people use it, then 1, switching costs are really high. People don't want to jump to the new platform because it's just not enough people on there. You see a lot of failed social networks because of this, but also they just get used to it. It's so good, everyone's on there. And why would you go somewhere else? Like, it's just the place to be. It's called a network effect. And what it really is doing is it's raising the barrier to entry. Anyone who wants to compete with you just has to get so many users that it's not really viable. And then the 3rd way to do it is called economies of scale. Economies of scale are simple. As you sell more products, you can sell them for cheaper because your costs go down, hopefully your efficiency goes up. And so over time, as you're selling more and more, you're getting what's known as economies of scale. You have lower costs. Lower cost means the competition cannot match your price, thus you win. All right, let's get into the juicy stuff. Let's talk about raising millions of dollars from investors. One of the weird things about StartX is that there's not really a specific classroom style structure where you go into, let's say, a talk on sales and then a talk on marketing and then a talk on fundraising. This doesn't really happen in the accelerator. What actually happens is there are these sort of pay it forward secret kind of meetings behind closed doors where a really successful founder will kind of get together a bunch of people and share some secrets that have worked for them in these very tight-lipped closed doors. And probably the most secretive thing at StartX is how to raise venture capital. And the reason for this is they have a very specific way of raising venture capital that is, I would say, non-traditional. And we use these tactics to raise $21 million, but I don't really want to gatekeep, so I'm just going to teach you what they taught me and share what I learned. So the first thing you learn is that you're not pitching a single investor. You often think that when you go in, you pitch, Sequoia Capital, and if Sequoia Capital passes, well, you go talk to Andreessen and Benchmark and blah, blah, blah. That's not actually how venture capital works. You're not pitching an investor, you're pitching an ecosystem. It's kind of like high school drama on steroids. I was actually on the phone with a portfolio company that we invested in, and I was explaining this to him. I was like, imagine you go into a bar and there's a bunch of hot chicks that you want to talk to. Maybe you want to pick one up. So you go and you say hi to the first one, and she blows you out, says, get out of my face, I'm not interested, you suck. You go to the second one, blows you out. Third one, blows you out. By the 17th girl you talk to in that bar, you're done. No one is going to give you a chance because they've all watched you get blown out over and over and over again. Hopefully that metaphor is not too personal or real for some of you, but that's kind of what raising venture capital is like. You think you're pitching one investor, but you're not. You're pitching into an ecosystem. And in this ecosystem, all the associates, principals, they're all in these little group threads, and they're saying, oh, did you meet Michia today? We heard he's working on Prodigy. What did you think? Oh, we think it sucks. We're passing. And all of a sudden, what happens is you start getting black marks. And when you get these black marks, what actually is happening is that you are losing momentum and credibility in the ecosystem. And so a lot of the Stanford StartX philosophy is around how do you avoid black marks in the ecosystem? How do you not get rejected 17 times in front of everybody so that no one wants to touch your deal? There's a few ways to do that. First is to not actually go out and actively pitch. You want to start by having some casual chats. And you want to do this in a very specific order. I'll get to that in a second, but let me talk about the chats. In the chats, you're going to these investors and you're saying, hey, listen, we're thinking about fundraising. We might do it in a month or two. We're not sure yet. But I'd love to tell you what we're working on just to get your take, get your feedback, and hear what you think about our company. And you're going to have these chats a few times. And what you're looking for is an investor that says, hey, listen, between you and me, I don't think you should go fundraise. Why don't we just do an early round right now? I think we get together our guys, cut you a check, and you can just run this thing. You're looking for people that are trying to preempt your round. And that's so important because if you're getting those signs, it's a good sign that you're actually ready to go raise. On the other hand, if everyone's like, yeah, this business does sound really hard, but I wish you the best of luck. I hope it goes well for you. Let's stay in touch for future rounds. That kind of BS that a lot of VCs do. That's a sign that you are not ready to raise or your business needs some work. And the way you do that, I said there's a very specific order, and you want to go to what I would call tier 3 VCs. Tier 3 VCs they're not bad. Cash is cash, but they're not the Sequoias and Andreessen Horowitz of the world, let's say. And you want to start with them. Have some casual conversations with them. Then, if that's going well, start your tier 2s. And then finally, when you talk to your tier 1s, you should be buttoned up. You've had 20, 30 meetings with these lower tier VCs, so that when you go into those meetings, you are so sharp, so crisp, you know your numbers, you know your objection handling, and you can actually get business done. Now, on top of that, there are 3 specific things you need to do to actually have a chance of getting money from these investors. First is the introduction. In our experience, and I've seen this across my company, now the companies that I'm investing in as a VC, and also dozens of my friends' companies, the introduction is actually one of the biggest factors in the meeting. If you have a super strong intro from an amazing founder who's made VCs a bunch of money, not only will they take the meeting, but they are way more likely to invest. And on the other hand, if you have a intro that's kind of like, hey, I met Muh-ky-uh at this coffee thing for startups. He's working on this new AI thing. He asked me if I could intro you, so connecting you guys on a thread. Hope it helps. That sucks. I've had those intros. They never turn into checks, and you just waste your time. So you need to hustle for really strong intros, and that does mean pitching people that don't know your business on why they should like your business so that they'll give a strong intro to someone that they know. Hopefully that makes sense. And the second thing you want to do is you want to batch these pitches. After you've had your casual chats, you want to try to have 10 to 20 meetings per week. And this is so critical because what you want to do is you're forcing everyone to make decisions around the same timeline. If people are lagging, you remind them to catch up. If people are moving a little fast, maybe you kind of slow play it and pump the brakes a bit. But you're trying to get everyone to decide within the same week if they're investing or not, so that 1, the black marks don't spread too much for people passing. And 2, the people that do invest are all bidding at the same time. And this is how valuations get much, much higher very quickly, and you get much more money. And I saw this firsthand in our own round. We started raising at a $8 million valuation, and the very first check in the round was $200,000 at an $8 million valuation. And then we got more interest, and so we bumped the valuation to an $11 million valuation. We raised some money on that, and then ultimately we raised at an $18 million valuation and had offers at a $36 million valuation for our seed round. And that was back before AI, back like when seed rounds were not supposed to be raised at $36 million valuations. But it was because we had so much FOMO. And the only way we achieved that was by getting everyone to decide on the same timeline. Now, on top of that, the final piece of advice is do not let investors sit in the maybe column. One of the StartX founders gave me some of the best advice, which is in the public markets, you can buy what's called an option. And an option is basically you are paying real money to have the option or right to buy that stock in the future. You literally pay the money today so that you can buy it at this price in the future. However, in the private market, an investor can get an option in your startup by just saying, hey, this is really interesting. Let's stay in touch. Or, you know, we're still analyzing the market. Or, hey, our team's still working on this, but like, we're super interested. We're sticking into this really hard. They will sit on the maybe column all day. So what you need to do is you force them. You say, from today, what is your decision process like? How many internal meetings do you need? How many days do you need? How many weeks to get to a yes or no? And you hold them to that. Do not let investors sit in the maybe column. As a beginner founder, I know what it's like. You're gonna be so worried, oh my gosh, if I push them, if I force them to make a decision, they might have been a yes, but they're gonna be a no. That's not true. What actually can happen, and I genuinely believe this, it's ridiculous to say, they might have been a no if you let them sit around, but by forcing them to make a decision a little faster, they might actually be a little fearful. They might have a bit of FOMO, and they will be a yes. So do not let your investors sit on maybes. By the way, I don't have a script here. I'm reading from a few slides, so I was supposed to say this earlier in the video, but I forgot. If these videos are helpful, could you subscribe to the channel? Our last video gained 20,000 subs for the channel, which is insane. That lets me know that these videos are helpful. And if I see this one working as well, I'll make more videos like this. So hit the subscribe button and let's get back to the value. So lesson 4, what to focus on early in your startup. In a startup, there are always 100 things to focus on. And what you focus on really matters. It's these small little micro decisions of where you spend your time, where you spend your limited resources that actually decide if your startup will be successful or not. And I learned this actually from a VC who I have had the great pleasure of being rejected in every single fundraise I've ever done. He rejected me in the early, just an idea angel raise. He rejected me at the seed raise. He rejected me at the Series A. And then I think by the time we were like raising larger rounds, their fund was too small. But that's not to say that I don't like him. Actually, I really like this VC. He's very smart, and he was just looking for something different than us. But his name is Leo Polovitz, and he wrote this article called Startups Are Risk Bundles. And I think it is the best framework for figuring out how to get maximum ROI for your limited resources at a startup. In the article, he gives an example that I'm just gonna walk you through here because I think it really helps emphasize what you as a founder should be focusing on. So the example is a company just raised a Series seed round, and they're thinking about, we want to raise our next Series A at $50 million valuation. And they have two scenarios. Scenario A, focus on product. And these are technical founders in the example, both of them technical founders. And so Leo assigns them a 95% chance of building a successful product. They're engineers, they can probably build it. But he gives them a 25% chance of selling that product at mass. And so if you do the expected value calculation, 50 million times 95% chance of building the product times a 25% chance of selling the product gets you a $12.5 million valuation. Kind of crappy. On the other hand, they can focus on sales. So they have the same 95% chance of building the product, but now they've sold it, so it's a 100% chance of selling it. They've shown they can do it. Now, that $50 million valuation target times a 95% chance of building the product times a 100% chance of selling it gives them an expected value of $47.5 million. And this example really helps frame how you should focus as a startup. You should look at your startup as what Leo calls a risk bundle. What are the things that that we think are most likely to go well, and what are the biggest risks that could kill this business, and focus on killing those at every stage of the business so that you constantly build this momentum and build a resilient company that can handle the ups and downs of startup life. All right, the next lesson is how to build like a Silicon Valley startup. And this is probably one of the things that I see people outside of the Valley just get completely wrong time and time again. They build companies, but they have no idea the actual pace of a Silicon Valley startup. And the example I'm going to share comes from Mike Cassidy. He gave a talk that is ingrained in my brain. It was called Speed is a Competitive Advantage. And he gives the example of a typical company schedule. And it's something like explore ideas, 3 months, raise money, 3 months, hire core team, 3 months, build V1 product, 12 months, marketing launch, 3 months. And so your launch time adds up to 24 months. And they said, here's a real startup pace. Explore ideas, 2 weeks. Raise money, 2 weeks. Hire team in open office, 2 weeks. Build MVP, 2 months. Launch time, 3 months. And if this sounds insane, understand that this is actually the real pace that Silicon Valley moves at. And once you just accept that, you will be amazed at how much faster you can just build, because you start cutting corners on things that just don't matter and focus on what really matters, which is finding a problem, finding a solution, and shipping something that people love. You just do those things relentlessly fast. And that's how startups actually work. Now, let's talk about how to build resilience as a founder. Everyone knows that resilience, the ability to endure hard times, is necessary to succeed as a founder. But how do you actually do it? Well, StartX has a really interesting way that I've never seen anyone talk about of how they actually teach you about this. So what happens is in StartX, you meet all these different founders, and sometimes they're working in the co-working space. Sometimes you're just like catching lunch with them or like seeing them at an event. And some of them are really crushing it. Like they are up into the right, millions of dollars of revenue added every month, blah, 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 blah. They're crushing it. But most are being crushed, if I'm being honest. Like, you just feel bad for them. Like, man, just pack it up and go home. This startup thing is clearly not working for you. Your team is losing faith. You've lost faith. Your customers are canceling. Like, why are you still here? And then, honestly, you just kind of forget about them. You're like, yeah, they're dead. I write them off. And then one day, maybe it's 6 months later, maybe it's years later, you see the headlines. So-and-so company, that one that you gave up on, acquired for $3.2 billion. And you're like, what? Like, I watched that company die, and now they're acquired for $3.2 billion. And this would be crazy enough if it happened once, but this happens over and over and over again. And you just see it so many times at StartX that you realize you can never write anyone off, including yourself. You start to believe that you can actually become successful. And so I understand that me telling you this is actually not building the belief in you. What I would do if I was in your shoes is I would try to build a network of founders that you're catching up with every now and then, whether it's online, digital, in person, and just really watch how they build, watch the ups and downs, because by seeing your peer group go through those ups and downs and make it through, you will not give up on yourself, because you build the internal self-belief that if they can do it, you can too. That's not something I can teach you in a video, but I can guarantee you it will make a massive difference in your life if you can surround yourself with people like this. And the final thing I learned at StartX was how to build a personal board of advisors. See, one of the first things you do in the Accelerator is you build an advisor network. You go out, you find advisors, you pitch them on your startup, try to get them to help you along the way. There's a bit of criteria that I think really matters here. First is you want to find CEOs that are 3 to 5 years ahead of where you want to be. If they're 20 years ahead, it's not really relevant to you. They're focusing on how do they deal with their public investors or their hedge funds that are shorting them or whatever. It's not relevant. You want CEOs that are 3 to 5 years ahead, ideally in the same industry or category of product. So what you don't generally want to look for is, let's say you're building a B2B SaaS. You don't want some amazing founder who built a clothing brand. Yes, they might be amazing. They might know so much about operations and everything else, but they're missing some of the core lessons and context to help you. So ideally, same industry or category or product. And then the third thing, maybe the most important, they have to be willing to commit to meeting at least once per month. I had one mentor that I actually got through StartX, and I really liked the guy. Like, he was so nice, so helpful, but I only met with him twice. Once when I pitched him on helping me in my company, and then once at this event that he was at, like he was speaking on stage, and he's like, I got a little bit of time at midnight, and so I met him, I think it was closer to 1 a.m., in this like hotel lobby in San Francisco. And to be fair, he gave me like 2 hours of his time at 1 a.m. And I was incredibly grateful, like super nice of him to do. But I kind of needed help more often. And so you want to find people that actually are available, that are willing to meet and can kind of prioritize this, because not everybody wants to prioritize being a mentor, but it's important for you to find people that can. And the way that you also entice them to meet with you and so on is you want to give them a portion of your company. It's typically 0.25% to 0.5% of your company, and that's in equity. And I've seen it go lower, but that's a good range for like real solid people. But really important that equity needs to vest. And specifically, you want to make it vest over 2 years with what's known as a 6-month cliff, which, if you don't know startup speak, just means that for the first 6 months, if it's not working out, they suck. You say, listen, let's part ways, and there's no equity exchanged. They only start getting bits of equity every month after the first 6 months. That's really important. And 3 mentors is best. I like 3 because what you'll find is that you'll go to one and they just give you like their view and their opinion. They tell you to go this direction. You go to a second one and they might tell you to go to a completely different direction. By the time you meet with 3 about like some big problem that you're facing, what you'll find is that none of them may have the perfect solution, but they've given you enough data to allow you to make the final call. And as a CEO, that is ultimately your job. You make the decisions, it's the buck stops with you. And by having 3, it really helps kind of round out your data collection process so you can make good decisions. And that is everything I learned at Stanford StartX. Hope it helps.